We are ready. We have a quorum.
Okay, well, I am, we'll call the meeting of the VW Advisory Committee to order. This is February the 23rd, 2023. We do have a quorum. The first item of business would be for tech staff to explain how this works. I think most of us are more accustomed to Zoom than Teams.
Okay, I just want to welcome everybody to the Teams meeting. Just some little bit different situation here. If you do need to make a comment or raise your hand, please wait until the appropriate time to do so. The options to raise your hand and use the chat feature are at the top of the screen as opposed to the bottom in the Zoom meeting. And that should be all that we need to do for today.
Okay. Well, that's not gonna work. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes.
Okay. I gotta pull up my agenda. You want to put the agenda up on the screen? Yeah. Okay, are there any questions from members on how you use Teams? Okay, well, then the next order of business is project implementation status report from IDEM. There are 4 items, and is the same person going to present all of them, or
Yeah.
who's going to start? Okay.
Will beat me.
Okay.
Johnson.
Okay.
Would you like us to roll?
Yes.
All right. So today, actually, if all goes smoothly, should be a relatively short meeting because it's really just a lot of updates on some of the good things that we've been accomplishing, and kind of a brief rollout of items recommendations to the committee for the round 4 Diesel-Wise Indiana project solicitation that closed in December of last year. And then we'll talk a little bit about where we kind of envision going from here. So with that, let's get started. So first we'll touch on rounds 1 through 3. These are the first 3 rounds. And if you'll recall, we have historically broken our program down into sort of 2 categories: the on-road, non-road RFP that we would usually release in the spring, and then the DIRA option with the Diesel-Wise Indiana with Volkswagen DIRA option program that we typically would release in the fall. So first, let's talk about rounds 1 through 3, on-road, non-road. This will look pretty familiar to what you all have seen in our last meeting. Some slight updates as far as project completions. As far as on-road, non-road, we had 125 applications we received through those first 3 rounds. 82 projects were awarded out of those 125 applications. And of those 82 projects to date, we have completed 46 of those projects, or 46 of those projects have been completed is a better way to state it. We would have liked to seen that 46 be a slightly bigger number, but I think everybody online and in person is aware of the supply chain challenges that industries like this are dealing with right now. So in a perfect world, we would see a bigger number than 46, but we're content with what we're seeing so far. So of those projects we have seen as complete, we have done 178 school buses. I would say, as I recall, of those 178 school buses, probably 8 of those school buses to date were electric. The majority of the remainder are propane. We have awarded so far a total of 11 electric school buses through this program. 22 transit buses have been replaced. Many of those were electric transit buses. The majority remaining would have been CNG or compressed natural gas transit buses. Several municipal trucks have been replaced. 18 refuse haulers have been replaced. And as you recall, these are really some of the greatest bang for buck projects. All 18 of those refuse haulers were diesel to natural gas projects. Under this program, we've done one locomotive project in which we pulled a switcher locomotive out of commission and replaced it with a total electric rail car mover. And then there are 39 other sort of hard to describe vehicles or equipment that have been improved or replaced. Now, touching quickly on rounds 1 through 3 of the Diesel as Indiana with PW DERA option program. In this program, we've had 18 applications through those first 3 rounds. Of those 18 apps, we awarded 11 projects, and 10 of those 11 projects are actually complete. So we've had a really good success rate here on the non-road side. Some of the projects that you'll see that we've had completed, we've done 8 excavators, which, you know, are pretty easy projects to do in a timely manner because those are typically in stock. We've done some non-road dump trucks. Those are those giant dump trucks you see on construction sites. Through this program, we've also done some locomotive projects. These would be ones where they were not all electric rail car movers, but they were tier 4 final clean diesel rail car movers, replacing a switcher locomotive. So still a huge improvement. We've done a couple bulldozers, a couple of terminal trucks, some front end loaders, and a material handler, which is a piece of equipment that generally speaking moves a heavy and large product around a facility, kind of like an excavator, but a little bit bigger. You'll see a picture of one of those here in a bit. So switching over to our EV infrastructure programs, these are really exciting updates as well. So on the level 2 side, what you see on the screen here is a slightly different map than you would have saw at our September meeting. Again, we had 18 applications for 111 stations when we first put this out a couple of years ago. In the end, we were able to award 30 communities with 55 charging stations. And at our September meeting, we had 4 projects that were complete. And as of now, we have 10 projects that are complete. So about a third of those. And when we say projects, I'm really talking about communities, not stations. So although it might be hard to see if you look at the map, kind of right center, all of our green dots that you see there are completed, up and running level 2 charging stations that folks can now utilize. In some of those locations, I think at 2, maybe 3 of those locations, we actually provided funding support for 2 charging stations in that community as opposed to just 1. That's why if you count the green dots, I think you're only going to count 8 dots compared to the 10 that are actually done. Next slide. Then let's talk briefly about our DC fast charging infrastructure project. Okay. So as you'll recall, we had 28 applications for 135 stations across the state. We went out for another solicitation, so to speak, or for further information, not so much a solicitation, from kind of 4 of our really, really solid applicants. In the end, after getting those responses, we did award the Indiana Utility Group, which is a collection of Indiana utilities. We did award them the funds for this project. All of the funding agreements between our IUG partners and IDEM are fully executed. At this point, about 45% of the site agreements are in place, with the balance of them expected within weeks. And when I say the balance, you know, I guess that's probably not the best way to say it, with the majority of the remainder to be in place within weeks. We do have, as you might imagine, some site host and site location challenges. You know, we were hoping to see a higher number than 45% of the site agreements in place at this point. What we're running into is competition, as you might imagine. You know, when billions of dollars are presented to retail organizations as a possible opportunity to get into the EV charging realm, they want to step back and take a closer look and decide if this is the program they want to use or they want to wait for something better. So there are some challenges folks are having with site agreements, but it does appear that things are progressing pretty smoothly. We will, in the end, have 61 stations installed and operational by the end of this year. And we do expect that some of the first DC fast charging stations from this program will be on the ground and operational in maybe late April or sometime in May. Next slide. Now, before I go into the financial highlights, does anybody have any questions on any of the updates I've provided thus far? All right, hearing none, we shall continue. So what I'm going to show you here on this slide, it says current financial snapshot of the Mitigation Trust Fund, but current in my, I guess the way I would phrase this is the current, for lack of a better term, audited value of the Mitigation Trust Fund as of the end of 2022. So as you may recall, IDEM is required to submit 2 reports per year on where we are financially to the trustee. They review those reports, and then again, they get posted. So we'll talk a little bit about what this actually does show you. Just rolling quickly across the column headers, because that's the best place to start. The project categories that you see there, that's that kind of 5 grouping breakdown that we ultimately decided we wanted to put into our BMP, our beneficiary mitigation plan, as you recall. Next column represents how much we allocated to that particular category. The next column, VW mitigation funds spent. Those are the funds that have actually been submitted to the Volkswagen trustee for reimbursement from that category. That doesn't include funds that are already obligated to existing and ongoing projects. This table represents those projects that are complete and that have been submitted to the trustee for reimbursement. The matching funds is a nice category to take a look at because it gives you some sense for how much of a total project cost Volkswagen is covering versus the project partner. Our last 2 columns, the Volkswagen percentage of the total is, as I said, that gives you a sense for how much of the funding we are providing in support of the total project versus the project partners. And then when you see Volkswagen remaining percentage, that is simply a computation of the difference, if you will, from what we have spent versus what we allocated to that category. Now, when we look down at these, once again, remembering that this line, that column does not include projects that are currently obligated funding and are underway. So the actual numbers there would be higher from that perspective. And I think one thing that is worth note here is if you look at rows 2 and 3 of our categories, non-road equipment and the DERA option, what you'll see is that we still have 96% of the non-road equipment and vehicles allocation remaining. And you'll see that we only have 50% of the DERA option allocation remaining. For reporting purposes, what we have found is most of the projects that are non-road equipment and vehicles have been funded as a part of our DERA option program. So in the end, what that really means is that we might see the non-road equipment and vehicles category not hit its full allocation amount, and the DERA option category exceed its allocation amount. Those 2 combined basically are our non-road category. Because what we're finding is the second row, that non-road equipment and vehicles piece, really requires folks to transition to electric alternatives for the most part. And there just aren't as many of those out there as we were hoping. The DERA option allows them to do electric alternatives in addition to alternative fuel or clean diesel. So we're seeing just a little bit more of a demand on that side overall. And then the last category that you'll see there is our program administration. And you'll see that no funds have actually been submitted for reimbursement from that program yet. At our next meeting, you will see some funds being pulled down from that category. And if you'll recall, that program administration, a significant portion of that line item is comprised of our electric vehicle infrastructure, education outreach, and marketing program. And speaking of that, we could bounce to the next slide. And the one after that. So as you'll recall, as a part of our education outreach and marketing program, one of the things that we quickly came to the realization of was that although we wish we were, as experienced and knowledgeable in the EV industry as everyone else, there are folks that do this on a day-to-day basis. So we put out for bid the opportunity for an entity to help us administer the education outreach and marketing program, and ultimately Drive Clean Indiana, which is Indiana's only designated clean cities organization, was awarded that grant. And we're going to talk just a couple, we've got 3 slides on the education outreach and marketing program. I think it's really important to note that none of these things would likely have been happening if not for engaging Drive Clean Indiana, another entity to kind of lead the charge for us. Next slide. Now, I did also want to note on the Drive Clean Indiana standpoint, they've had a little bit of a bug run through their office. So they are available remotely at the end if we have some questions for them. But I'm just presenting on their behalf so that they didn't have to get out on the road, since it'd be better for them to keep their bug there, and we'll just leave it at that. So the monthly meetings are an incredibly important part of our program. So each and every month, I believe it to be the 3rd Thursday of each month, as it turns out, IDEM, Drive Clean Indiana, and a representative from each of our Indiana utility group partners participate in a monthly meeting. And in each of these meetings, we start off, with sort of a roundtable of everybody sharing what progress has been made since our last meeting. So in the last month, what has happened? And a lot of times what that will lead us to are some challenges that some of our partners are having. So we can then, because this group is working so collaboratively, discuss those challenges and share some of the solution that maybe some of the other partners have found to be helpful. Really good example of this recently is there is a retail organization that one of our utility companies has been struggling to work with as it relates to site host agreements. But another one of our energy partners or utility partners has not had those same challenges with that same retailer. So offline, they can get together and figure out how to help each other get over this hump. Each and every meeting, we typically will have a priority project that we're pretty focused on. So we'll spend the majority of each meeting really just drilling into that one topic, whatever it might be. And at the end of each meeting, we'll kind of have an open question and answer session for anybody that has any questions, issues, challenges, comments, funny stories, whatever, to share, so that we kind of all part and feel comfortable at the end of each meeting that we've accomplished what we wanted to accomplish on that day. All right, next slide. One of the first priorities that the group as a whole had was to develop a logo and some branding strategies. So what you see on this page is the logo that the IUG partners have all endorsed. And so our logo and our brand are present on this page. The top left obviously is the overall logo. You'll see that the branding for the program is Go EV In. So Go EV Indiana Fast Charging Program. You'll see in that logo that in most every place we post these, it's going to be in partnership or collaboration with whatever the local utility is in that area. Where we can kind of take advantage of the Go EV In, because Go EV In sounds really similar to Go Even. We can use things like the flyer on the bottom left, go even faster and further with Indiana's new electric vehicle charging network. So we find that to kind of have a nice flow to it. And then what you see on the right-hand side is that literally something that we're continuing to work on. There is a survey that the IUG partners are participating in to kind of nail down what the EV charging screens, not the screens as much as the wraps, will look like. Again, including some branding on those. So all but one of our Indiana Utility Group partners are using the same entity for their charging stations, and they're the same chargers. So what you see on the left side of the tall ones where it says it has Wabash Valley Power Alliance, for example, listed, that would be the front of the charger. So when you pull up to a charger, that's what you're going to see. Again, the local utility will be prominent in whatever the area is that this charger is located. Those white highlights that you see sort of towards the middle, because these are all the same chargers, we can feel confident in this wrap working pretty well. The center that you see in that, the white center, is kind of the screen and the instructions and such for how to use the charger. And then the two pieces you see on the side would be the two dispenser holes or connectors. So that's where the connectors would come out of the charger. And then the EV charger back is basically just a giant opportunity for a billboard. So what you see there is one of the concepts that's being discussed as far as the back of the charger. And you'll see at the top, it kind of draws people to the goevindiana.com website. Next slide. And here is that website. This is another local product of, or a recent product of the work of this group. So this website is in a near final draft form. The hope is that we will probably release the website, at least the conversation and the thought at this time is that the website will probably be released somewhere near the time that some of our first chargers are actually hitting the ground and operational. And I mentioned earlier that could be, April, May-ish, potentially. So what the kind of information that we're including on this website under the About section, it's just going to talk a little bit about, what an EV is, a little bit of an EV 101, about who the Go EV Indiana group is. So talk a little bit about the collaboration of the statewide organizations, if you will. Members, that's going to provide information on our Indiana Utility Group members, so kind of the local utilities, and links to their websites, which can give them additional information on a variety of programs that maybe each of the utilities might have related to EVs. Under the news category, this is going to be where when we get to the point that we're having events and media releases and other things, that will fall under the news drop down. And then in resources, lots of good stuff in there. We'll have a EV glossary, kind of a description of how to charge and maybe some charging etiquettes, a list of EVs that are currently available in current model years. There will be an EV calculator in there that will allow folks to put in, this is the EV that I'm looking at. This is, these are my utility rates. Basically, it's a calculator that gives them an opportunity to do the math to determine from a fueling standpoint, what kind of cost savings they may see on a monthly or yearly basis. It'll also include whatever incentives might be available at this point in time. And of course, it'll have a frequently asked questions section as well. And then the final piece that's probably the most helpful piece is the Find a Station section. And the button for Find a Station will bounce you over to a DOE website that is managed by the Department of Energy, and each Clean Cities organization in each state is responsible for making sure that those charging stations and all fuel locations are as up to date as possible. So they'll be able to just go there, click there, put in their city, wherever they are or wherever they're going, and see what charging stations are available to them in that area. Next slide. So are there any questions on the EV infrastructure program at this time?
I do have a question. Once they are operational, is there going to be a way to track how, how many people or how many vehicles are using them?
Yes, one of the requirements of the funding agreements that we have with each of the utility partners is reporting. And a lot of those reporting requirements include things like how many unique vehicles showed up there on a monthly, in a given month. There'll be quarterly reports, if I recall, maybe they're biannual, I don't recall for sure. But yes, we will be getting that data with a lot of good things like how many unique vehicles, how long were they there? What was, the downtime of the facility, meaning when was it not available for charging for whatever reason? So lots of good information will be able to be pulled from that.
And over time, we'd be able to keep track of trends.
Are
Right.
most of the ones that are along the interstate, by a place that people can go in and have a sandwich or something?
Yeah, that's another thing that we have, that was a part of the RFP, when we put it out there that, these can't be in the middle of nowhere. They need to be in a safe, well-lit location where people can go do something while their vehicle is charging. Admittedly, there are gonna be some sites that are gonna be better at that than others. If there's a site in a large retail parking lot, for example, that's a pretty easy one that you go there, you can easily kill time there. But there may be some that are not as convenient as others, but that's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions on the EV program or the education outreach and marketing program from folks? Committee members?
Hi there. I posed a couple of questions in the chat, but I'll just go ahead and voice them here. Regarding the level 3 charging stations, what resources are available to the public to be notified of new station availability or progress on specific sites?
Can you state the last half of the question again?
Sure. The last half was what resources are available to the public to be notified of new station availability or progress on specific sites?
Well, progress is obviously going to be something that's managed internally. As far as notification, that's what the Go EV Indiana website is going to be your best resource for. And we will be, my expectation is that most of our utility partners are likely to be conducting some sort of event whenever they're kind of breaking open their first charging network in their location. And if I might ask, who is this that I'm speaking to?
You're speaking to Josh Burkhead.
Okay, hey, Josh. Any other questions from any committee members?
Looks like Joyce has one. Joyce, do you have a question?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have a question, ma'am. I'm sorry. If I raised my
You're-
hand on the
you're-
chat, it was,
it's-
I apologize.
Flashing back and forth, so I thought maybe you did.
All right, fair enough. So it sounds like we're good on those then, so we can go ahead and move on. So here we are at round 4 for the Dieselwise Indiana with Volkswagen Deere option program. As you'll all recall, go ahead and bounce the next slide, please. Thanks, Kevin. Well, this RFP did close in December of last year, and we ultimately ended up receiving 11 applications for funding. 9 of those applications were determined by the team to be eligible for funding. One of the applicants was requesting funding for ineligible vehicles, and one of the applicants was requesting funding but didn't own any replaceable vehicles at an Indiana location. So overall, we received applications totaling about $3.4 million for the $3.5 million that was allocated to round 4. So we almost hit the target, but not quite. We had, again, numerous repeat applicants to the program that were selected for partial funding in some of our previous rounds. And the average evaluation score this time around was 45 out of 100, which for those committee members that have been paying attention, that's That's probably slightly lower than they have been in years past. One of the key reasons for that is the transformational scoring criteria. If an entity is moving from only diesel equipment to an alternative fuel or electric equipment, they would get the maximum points in that particular category. But because we have so many repeat applicants that have found this program to be really good and supportive of the moves that they want to make as an organization, they're not getting the full amount of transitional points any longer because they are now continuing down that path as opposed to it being new. And then the last couple bullets really are not overly relevant since our ask for funding was not quite this, did not quite reach the total available. But as always, we focus on finding a justifiable way to fund as many as we can. And, you know, in years past, if you recalled, if we had more requests than we had funds available, you know, we just wanted to make you aware of the fact that what we're presenting as recommendations are certainly not the only options. But in this case, of course, since the ask is less than the available, should be pretty straightforward. All right. So here are the 9 awards, or the 9 award recommendations. Once again, what you'll see in green, those that are highlighted in green, Carter Express, Consolidated Terminals and Logistics, Kokomo Grain, and Fastenal Company. These are all new applicants to the program. So, you know, 4 of our 9 were new applicants, and that's always exciting to have some new applications in there. You will also recall that we made a concerted effort in our outreach as well as our partners' outreach to try to draw in more central and southern Indiana applications for funding from this program, if at all possible. And as I have said many times, we can only fund projects by, you know, from which we receive an application. We do see, if you look at that second column, you know, we've got a project from Dearborn County, and we have several projects here in central Indiana. So, you know, we did have a little bit of a bump in the amount of project applications that we receive from central and southern Indiana. In essence, what we're looking at here, you can see that the total recommended award is the same as the Volkswagen request for each of these entities. They're all quality projects. They're all eligible under the way in which the RFP is structured. And that total brings us to a little under 3.4 million of the 3.5 million that is currently available. And then I know that it's always nice to see what you're funding. I know that that is often helpful. So we're going to spend a few slides on that, and then I'll open it up for any questions from the committee and a vote from the committee. So go ahead. So one of our project applicants, Metroports in Northwest Indiana, they operate at the Port of Indiana in Burns Harbor. One of the projects that you see, that top left piece, that is going to be an all-electric conveyor. So that's going to move dry product around their facility, and it's going to do it with electric power as opposed to a big diesel power plant. They also will be, we're recommending the award of obviously very large front end loader, going from an older front end loader to a tier 4 final front end loader that will be diesel powered. Metal management going to a tier 4 final excavator there on the top right. Next slide. RH Marlin there on the top left. That's basically a gravel screener that you see on the left. They're transitioning from one that is powered by a large diesel generator to an all-electric alternative. Top right, you'll see a Nucor steel project that's being recommended is transitioning a couple fork trucks from older diesels to new tier 4 final standard clean diesel alternatives. And then Carter Express, Fastenal, and Steel Dynamics are all looking at replacing some of their diesel terminal trucks in various locations with all electric terminal tractors that just shuttle those trailers you see behind there, if you will, around the parking lot to load, to unload, and to do other things with, to stage them for deployment off-site. Okay, next slide. And then finally, a couple others. On the right-hand side, you'll see consolidated terminals. This is what is referred to as a material handler. It's kind of like an excavator, but it does a little bit more. It's got a little bit more articulation in the way that you can maneuver it. A lot of times you will see these. We have actually funded one of these at the Port of Indiana as well. That is primarily used for loading and offloading cargo ships. This one will be working in a different environment. And then the Kokomo Grain Project, I have to say this one's actually kind of an exciting one for me personally, simply because that little front end loader that you see there on the screen that they're wanting to implement in their facility is total electric. We have not done any total electric loaders to date. So anytime we see a first one of something like this, it's particularly exciting to see as a result of the program. And then next slide. So it's at this point that I am here to answer any questions from committee members, and then we can go from there. And let's go ahead and slide back up to the, I guess that's slide number 4. That's slide right there. So any questions, comments, thoughts from the committee? As I said, it's pretty straightforward because, you know, the ask is less than the available. If no questions or comments, you know, a vote from the committee is all we would need to proceed.
Is there a motion to accept items recommendation?
So moved. This is Brian Rackensis.
Is there,
Second.
is there a second to the motion?
Second, Kay Nelson.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll try a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Hearing no nays, the motion is approved unanimously.
Very good, thank you. Let's go ahead and slide on forward then. Let's go to the next slide. So this would be 2023-24, kind of in a snapshot. So today we obviously met, we talked about round 4 RFP recommendations. You approved those recommendations, so we could check that line off. As I noted, we came in a little bit under the total available for this particular round, which means there are some funds available still. In addition to that, we know that there are some projects that are currently ongoing that may or may not actually complete. We also know that there may be some projects that change a little bit this way, that way, or maybe even come in under budget, which could put some additional funding back in the pot. So we believe that probably by August of this year, we should be able to really have a reasonable estimate of what the true available funds, considering all obligations and all projects, we should have a pretty good number by August of this year. And what we would be doing would be coming back to you all in August with kind of a plan for how we would like to roll those funds out, put those funds out on the street for hopefully one final request for proposals. And then after that, we internally will try to get that posted in September of this year. And then we will meet back here again about this time-ish next year for what will be probably the final meeting of the Volkswagen committee, in which there will be a need for a approval of any recommendations. That does not in any way mean that we can't get together one way or another, just to provide updates to those who are interested. And I believe, go ahead and bounce the next slide. I think that's it. This is where I pass it back to you, Chair Guard, for folks
Okay.
and comments.
Are there any public comments out there for those that are watching this committee meeting?
Hi, yes, this is Rob Hedges with Palmer Trucks of Indiana. We're a Kenworth dealership in Indiana, Illinois, Ohio, and Kentucky. We're about to take receipt of our first EV medium duty truck for one of our leasing partners and are working on the process right now of gathering orders for later this year into 2024. And I just wanted to see what's our best way to get connected for partnering with Clean Drive Indiana on the application process.
The application for round 5.
Yeah, it sounds like round 4 is complete, or did I
Right,
misunderstand?
Okay. Well, so it is IDEM that will be putting that RFP on the street.
Okay.
You obviously can reach out if you have a relationship with folks at Drive Clean Indiana. They're obviously very good at putting together applications for funding. You can certainly use them for that if you choose to. The way that I would say you'll be kind of keeping the loop is just keep an eye on the Diesel West Indiana website as well as the Indiana Volkswagen Mitigation Trust website. As soon as an RFP goes live, if you go to the Volkswagen website, if you have not been there before, it will ask you to provide an email address, so you'll get an automatic notification anytime the website changes with something substantive. If you haven't been there, be sure to do that so that you do get notified when an RFP drops.
Okay, so if I understood, are we able to just submit that directly with IDEM or work with IDEM?
Yeah, you would be submitting an application directly to IDEM.
Okay. Very good, thank you.
Any other questions, either committee members or members of the public?
There was one other one that came through on the chat. It says regarding the EV station wraps that you talked about earlier, are there any visual indicators planned on the wraps themselves or on other signage that indicates the charging speed and or connector types?
Well, the connector types will all be CCS, which is pretty much the level 3 or DC fast standard. And the charging speeds will typically be presented in the display of each charger. Now, I believe that most of the chargers that are being employed are either 125 or 175 kilowatt. So these have the capacity to do some true fast charging.
So are all manufacturers making their vehicles to adapt to the standard for charging stations?
Less one. Tesla obviously has their own very robust charging network. There is conversation that they are going to transition maybe some of their charging network over to CCS to allow folks that are non-Tesla owners to charge in those locations. When that happens, if that happens, we obviously don't have any control over. But the CCS adapter that will be the dispenser type for all 61 of our DC fast stations will basically charge anything other than a Tesla and certain Nissan products.
Okay.
And I should add, just to be fully clear, there are adapters that are available to Tesla owners if they choose to purchase one that would allow them to charge their Tesla at a CCS station such as ours.
Any further questions? Well, does staff have any more comments?
No, I think we're good.
We're all set for today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to compliment you all on how you've rolled out this whole project from beginning to end. It's obviously been a lot of work and, at first we kind of struggled a little bit, but I think it's gone exceptionally well, and you all have done a remarkable job putting the information together for us in a way that we can understand it. So I did want to make that comment.
We appreciate that. It's been a labor of love for us all, hasn't it?
Well, with that, I guess we wait to see, get some sort of an email from your staff as to the next appropriate date. You probably don't want to try to set it right now.
Right, we want to make sure that we are comfortable and confident with what the final amount of money would be left in the trust fund before we start putting together further recommendations for the committee. But I suspect that in the May timeframe is when we'll probably poll members for availability for a meeting between late July and early September.
Okay. Well, if there are no other comments from committee members, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second by Kay.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Well, we are adjourned and thank you, everyone. Again, I apologize for being late. Now I gotta go clean up.
Now you gotta go clean up your coffee spill, right?
Yeah, now I gotta go clean up the coffee spill.
All right, well, everybody have a great day.
Yeah, great, safe travels,
Thanks, all.
Jay.
Okay, thank you all.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that was easy. Are we done? Yeah.